I really appreciate you guys coming. My name is Peter Heinrich. Thanks for joining me. I don't know if you were able to I don't recognize anybody from my earlier talk, but I'll give you a little bit of background. I started in the games industry in 1990 as a developer and worked for a bunch of different companies between then and now, and eventually ended up at Amazon about 5 years ago, where I'm a developer evangelist, which means that I basically travel the country and talk to people about getting their games, especially indie developers, getting their games onto Android, our platform, using Amazon services, of course, that kind of thing. And if you're on Twitter, I'd appreciate it if you take a minute to follow me. It's not necessary, but I'm happy to connect there if you guys are on Twitter. So, players to fans, what the heck? I mean, what does this even mean, players to fans, evolving from one to the other? And to me, it sounds kind of like marketing speak. Are there any marketers here? So I hate to call myself a marketer. I've been in the marketing department, but I really feel like I'm more of a developer. So hopefully I'm not going to try to be quite so markety-ish. But there's definitely a marketing aspect to this talk. And that's just because that for every successful game, whether it's Clash of Clans or Monument Valley, there's going to be some marketing involved, and it could be a huge campaign that costs tons of money, or it could be completely organic, word of mouth, viral marketing. And so we're Amazon. I mean, we're in the business of selling, usually physical goods, of course, but we also sell digital content like movies, music, apps, and we have a whole app store you've probably never heard of, but we do have an entire app store, and we think a lot about how to make app and game developers successful, because obviously their success is what drives our success. And it can be measured in a lot of different ways, via downloads or sales conversions or positive rankings or all sorts of things. But one of the key measures that we use is the monthly revenue. So this is especially important to us as it relates to the app poverty line. So this is a somewhat arbitrary cutoff, and it's not a term that we came up with or a specific dollar amount that we've set. It's just kind of an industry amount that's commonly taken to be about $500 a month. And Vision Mobile released a report that shows that, depending on the platform, only about 41 to 60% of apps ever cross that line or make more than $500 a month. And so I'm going to try not to shill too hard for Amazon, but well, maybe a little. But it does just so happen that developers who release on our Android-based platform tend to make more than $500 a month in general compared to the other platforms. Of course, our platform is the one that runs things like Fire Tablet, Fire TV, that kind of stuff. But regardless of where they're having success, we kind of want to know why they're having that success. And so we spend a lot of time talking to developers, trying to reverse engineer the tactics that they're using to affect their revenue numbers. And it turns out that you can learn a lot by looking first at the minimum viable product. And by this, I mean, of course, the simplest product and the supporting sales required to operate a business. And traditionally, the minimum viable product is based on three major components. There's part one, which is the game loop. It's just the collection of gameplay mechanics that make the game fun. It's often measured by how long people play, how often they come back, and of course, how they just straight up rate the game. You also need a way to make revenue or otherwise capture value. So maybe this means driving traffic to some other core business. It doesn't necessarily have to be a game, for instance. Maybe a dentist app that you've written tracks your visits, and its whole value is in encouraging you to have regular checkups and come back to the office and get you in the chair. Other apps may charge for the download, or they may sell in-app items, show ads, etc. And this is typically measured in ARPU, or average revenue per user, or RPPU, average revenue per paying user. And finally, you need to attract customers, especially new customers. And one way to do that is to buy advertising. Another is to have existing customers spread the word, maybe invite their friends. And this is definitely lower cost and more targeted, and you often hear it described, as I did earlier, in terms of virality or how viral your app is. And in the end, most people look at daily or monthly active users as a measure of this user acquisition. So all these together, taken all these pieces taken together make up the minimum viable product, but that's really just the start. And I mentioned that we spend a lot of time talking to developers, and if you and I were to sit down right now and discuss your app today, our conversation would probably gravitate toward one of these three areas and see how we can optimize each one. Because each one is high impact and they're also very tactical. But the truth is that the MVP is nothing new, and most app and game developers already know they need to hit these three basics. So the problem is that most stop right there. And what we found in reviewing the successful apps in our store is that the top apps build on the MVP. They keep going, and they realize that building a fan base is actually taking this to the next level. So what's a fan base good for? Well, as an example, I happen to love foosball. I'm pretty good. I'll accept any challenge. But foosball isn't a good model for a blockbuster game. I mean, it's fun. I make time for it. People I play with, make time for it. I have friends that I play with. And that's all fine and actually pretty required to make a popular pastime for players. But without a fan base, it's never going to go mainstream. It's never going to achieve the same scale of success. Now you consider this other pastime, which I think may even be loosely based on foosball. I don't know. And you look at the scale of the participation in this picture, and you look at the amount of revenue represented by this picture. The fans here outnumber players about 1,000 to 1, and that's just in the stadium. And the business opportunities obviously go far, far beyond that. So think about all the monetization that's happening here. There's the hot dog vendor and the jersey maker and the commentators. They've all built entire businesses around this game. And if you want to take your game from the players to a broader fan base, you can turn it from a foosball into a football, well, into a soccer. Football, it sounds more like foosball. Anyway, okay. But does that really translate to games? I mean, digital games? If we take out just a minute to look at this data from Newzoo, it's focused on esports only, but and I'm sure you're familiar, right? So these are broadcast events that basically show people playing video games. If you're under 30, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Otherwise, we can talk about it later. But you can see the current audience, which basically is the sum of the occasional and the frequent viewers, is already more than 200 million people. So this is just one component of fandom, and that's people watching other people play video games. It's huge. It generated almost $200 million last year in 2014. And Newzoo is projecting that this revenue is going to reach almost $500 million by 2017. So how do we as game developers move from a game for players to a game for fans? Well, we have to start thinking about moving beyond the MVP, as I mentioned. And this is what we see over and over again among the most successful games that are out there, and not just on our store. So the most successful games are strategic in how they engage their users. They engage them in new ways, and they figured out how to monetize outside of the game. So let's look at each of these refinements to the MVP, starting with user engagement. The first component is really made up of influencers. These are the people who get in early, they try it out, they show other people the fun, and they kind of spread the word about what's happening. These are the folks who are willing to experiment, explore your game, and they're really key to introducing it to the mainstream, since they can articulate what the game is all about. And influencers come in a lot of different shapes and sizes, but the best, most desirable ones are obviously the ones that actually advocate for you. So these are the people who just love your brand. They love to talk about it. They love to share it with other people. And Mini is a good example outside of the industry. You think about people who drive Minis. I don't know if any of you own a Mini. I know a couple people who do. And when they own a Mini, they talk about Mini all the time. It's kind of funny, actually. Or when you ride with them, they're waving at the other Mini drivers. And if anybody asks, oh, you definitely got to get a Mini. It's so fun to drive. The people are so cool. I love it so much. You should get a Mini. That's exactly the kind of person you want playing your game, too. This isn't by accident, though. It turns out that Mini, when they first came to the U.S., had huge, maybe they still do actually, I don't know, huge long wait times for their products. And so Carrie Martin, whose title was something like guardian of brand soul or something for Mini USA, actually came up with a program called Mini Waits, or Waiting is Fun. Make waiting fun? Make waiting fun. That's right. And she combined all these cool offers for the Mini users, like swag to keep people interested. She'd send them T-shirts and things. She sent them a stencil that said, Mini parking only, and you could paint it in your garage wall. They'd sent you a special unauthorized owner's manual of Mini. So it gave waiting customers this continued connection with the product, and it just turned all these people into really, really enthusiastic supporters of the product. So what a great way to build brand loyalty and generate positive discussion. So you expand that to the game world, you think, look at this. Look at how League of Legends supports their fans and lets them express their enthusiasm. So this is an example of fan art. This is a player who's so excited about the game, they've actually created something brand new just to express that feeling. And this is Annie and her bear Tibbers. I'm sure everybody knows Tibbers. And League of Legends celebrates this, right? They welcome these creations. They've got a whole online gallery of this stuff. And then within the game itself, they offer all sorts of rewards for drawing people in, like special characters and such, maybe a skin or a cool exclusive outfit for your character. And this actually serves two purposes, right? It shows people how to succeed. So it gives them a way to understand an objective in the game, and it also just naturally rewards this advocate behavior. Another kind of influencer is the professional, like a broadcaster or journalist or a league player who makes a living actually playing games or commenting on them. So as an example, Rainad27 is a prominent Twitch TV broadcaster who makes money from subscriptions to his channel, as well as playing in tournaments and doing sponsorship deals. So he has an amazing following, hundreds of thousands of followers, and many, many millions of views. And even though it's not possible for everyone, if you have the resources to connect with a professional player, you can tap directly into their network. So this was a Hearthstone event that Amazon did for marketing purposes, netted more than 250,000 viewers with about 10 million minutes watched. So involving a pro with a significant following obviously allowed Hearthstone to amp up their fan base in a hurry. Now we can look at another level of influence. I'm sure you recognize PewDiePie. They're the regular players, they're the professionals, but then they're also the celebrities, right? So PewDiePie is the #1 subscribed channel on YouTube, even ahead of YouTube itself. And I don't know if you know, but he played a little game called Flappy Bird back in January of 2013. And you can see from the graph that there was this immediate spike in related Google searches once his video went live. So this is an example of someone who's a real celebrity. It could be a movie star, or a musician, or a YouTuber like PewDiePie, and they get hold of your game, and it could just go crazy. PewDiePie got 25 million views for his Flappy Bird video, which certainly contributed to the explosion of Flappy Bird's fan base. Now, there are also developers out there who are working to foster advocacy before they even launch. And Vlambeer is one of my favorite examples. It's just a 2-person team. They've got multiple thousands of followers, multiple million views. And these are people who are watching them as they actually build their game. And they're live streaming as they construct it so the viewers can interact with them, which is one of the great advantages of a platform like Twitch. A viewer can say, oh, make that guy more muscular, or, oh, no, we want lasers over there. And the fans become part of the process, and the developer can respond and say, oh, yeah, that's a great idea, and he can do it. He can just put it in. Okay, let's try that. So how cool would it be if you could call up, The Voice or somebody and talk about what's going on, chat with the judge or the contestant, and participate with them in real time? And that's exactly what these developers are doing with their future customers. And of course, the subscribers get that special treatment too, right? They get enhanced access. They can subscribe, but they also usually get something in response, like a free game, of course. Here's another example of a development team using Twitch to build interest before the launch. Steamroller Studios actually had a full team of 5 different people who were all on at the same time. So you could hear from the producer and the director, the game designer. I think there was an artist and a developer. Yeah. So they're working on their game, they're talking through it, and at one point in this stream, they can actually do the pitch, like, here's how the game works, and the audience could say, confused, or Oh, that's awesome, that's great, and they can take it to the next level. And again, if you take the next step as a subscriber, you could buy the t-shirt. Maybe you get the game for free, and how awesome is that? Now you've got people walking around wearing your t-shirt with your logo on it, and others are asking, what's that? I'm really interested. And of course, the subscriber's like, hey, I'm an early access guy. I got to tell you all about this. This is really cool. So you get the twofer. You get the proceeds from the t-shirt, plus you get the advocacy. So thinking about all these kinds of influencers, advocates, you naturally start to think about hardware. Well, maybe not naturally, actually, but I've got a hardware slide, so I'm going to talk about that next. But you definitely need to make sure that your game is actually on the devices where your influencers' followers are. So obviously, you basically don't want to put the influencer in a position of advocating for your app and then not being able to follow through with that with their followers. Because if the followers can't get it, then number one, you won't get the conversion. And number two, that influencer won't advocate for you anymore. I mean, why would they tell their followers to go do something or try to get something that they're unable to do? So think about how to get to all the different devices, whether those are phones or tablets or TVs or more specialized cutting-edge hardware, depending on the circumstances. But the key concept here is that cross-platform development and responsive game design might allow you to do that with a minimum amount of effort. So boiling down the whole story of influencers, it's all about appealing to that small, targeted group that can encourage the mainstream to adopt. And most folks in the mainstream, they're not going to get your concept. They don't see all the pieces and how they fit together, and they won't notice you in a crowded marketplace. So it's the influencers who teach them all that stuff. Really focusing on them is really key to your ultimate success. Just a data point from App10 showing that if you communicate with your influencers, that even 3 months later, you still have elevated retention, about 4 times regular retention if you don't communicate with them at the beginning. Okay, great. So what's the second strategic way to build on the basics and promote a fan base? Content creation. You want to enable people to make content using your game as a base, which will lead to a greater variety of game experiences, and it turns out, longer lasting gameplay. So as far as content creators go, there are a few different classifications that are important to us. The first is the entertainer, and they take your core content and build their own content on top of it. So for example, I showed you PewDiePie. He's the guy who kind of freaks out about stuff and reacts to gameplay, and he's super entertaining to watch. And as I mentioned, he's number one. The number one subscribed channel on YouTube. So you think about Rihanna or One Direction or Katy Perry. These are all names you might recognize. They're all below PewDiePie. And in fact, if you think about it, you can do a search to find the top channels on YouTube, and you'll find that there are many others, three or four others that are in the top 10 that are all gamers. So gaming entertainment is really huge. There's also live streaming, such as Twitch, which I mentioned this several times already. And Twitch has about 100 million unique viewers with about 16 billion minutes watched per month. And the average viewer on Twitch watches for 106 minutes per day. So these are highly, highly engaged people. And again, you look at the broadcasters with the most followers. They're all game-related. Okay, so entertainers, we get it. People that just have a good time with playing these games and they entertain their fan base, but those aren't the only kinds of creative content that you can support. Obviously, another popular area of content creation is focused on education. So these creators basically say, I will teach you how to play Hearthstone, or I will teach you how to play League of Legends, or build a better deck, or figure out strategy. They break down all the nuances of the game, and they help you succeed as a player. So it's another reason to watch. One is, I think it's funny, it's entertaining. Another is, I really want to learn something here. The next classification of created content is esports. And this, again, meteoric rise just in the last few years. This is a picture of a stadium that's full of people, all watching 10 players in the middle of the stadium play computer games. They're basically playing League of Legends against each other. And the guys at the desk, these are the commentators for the game. They're providing color, background on the players, just like any other major sporting event. They'll walk you through the play-by-play, and the guys behind them are the fans, and you look at them, and they're just like, whoa! oh, I'm so excited. They're so excited to be there. And that is a huge, crazy, awesome fan base. Content creators also share their work in other ways. So an example would be, I mentioned League of Legends earlier with the picture of Annie and her bear. This is some fan art for Club Penguin, which is a property by Disney. And whether it's fan art or fan fiction, it's just a really cool way for people to connect with each other and show what they're doing. And of course, what most people think of in terms of generated content are things like Minecraft. There's so much that's been added to the original game through player-submitted mods that you can effectively play new content now almost indefinitely. Even when a new movie comes out, if someone will create a mod for it. So you want to play Hunger Games in Minecraft, you can do that. Similarly, but maybe not quite so obvious, Trivia Crack. A large portion of their content comes directly from their players, and they actually have a question factory so fans can create and curate the content, which is brilliant because it's more fun and it's much lower cost. Okay, so the last piece of this puzzle, building a fan base, is finding a way to generate alternative revenue. And by this I mean revenue that is outside the core monetization loop of the game. So you might typically pay for download, or you have in-app purchase or something like that. This is revenue that is outside of that mechanism. And it's revenue for you, of course, but in many cases, and for the most successful games, it's also revenue for the fans who are participating with you. And the most common way to do this, of course, is through products. And this is a great way to go because now you're making money off the t-shirt or the plush toy or the phone case, and at the same time you're getting those people to go advocate for you and show off your stuff. But you can also derive revenue from fan engagement outside the actual product in other ways. So an example like this, where you're raising almost $200 million for your Kickstarter project. Okay, that's one way to start generating revenue before you even start building your game. Another approach, just below that, Riot Games has more than 632 million views of their esports events, and every view is a potential revenue generator through ads. So Riot is making their normal revenue off the game, plus this ancillary ad revenue from external sources. Other ways to generate revenue, film and television, for instance, Lara Croft, Tomb Raider, 274 million, Resident Evil Afterlife, 296 million, Prince of Persia, 335 million. And Ubisoft actually created their own studio just so they can produce movies and TV shows based on their game properties. I think the Assassin's Creed movie is coming out next December. God knows what that's going to make. I'm excited. But now, obviously, not everybody has the resources to create a TV series or a blockbuster movie on their property, but we've already seen that there are lots of other broadcast opportunities now that are available on Twitch or YouTube, so even an indie developer can get into the action here. And you'll find that a lot of people who start on those forums move on to the big forums. So, and some of the stuff you see there is actually really polished and looks great, even though it was created on a shoestring budget. So putting this together, we've identified the 3 areas to explore beyond the basic MVP. Let's talk about each of the, we'll just review, I guess, the techniques that apply to each one. So for influencers, make sure you relate to their audience and that your game is on the devices they use, but also you should try to provide value to the influencers so that they're motivated to advocate for you and really treat them, the early players, like gold. To support content creation, encourage the player-initiated improvements, and this could be additional levels or mods. The bare minimum, I think, in this area would be to just accept feedback on your game so that you can make changes to the features or fix bugs. But in fact, you should also be celebrating the community's contributions, whether it's fan art or fan fiction, and worked for ways to make those contributors gain value from their contribution, whether that's just notoriety for appearing in your site, or maybe it's including their artwork in t-shirts that you make available, with your logo on it. And finally, explore alternative revenue streams. So physical goods are the most obvious approach, but you can also build new channels for your audience, helping them find you outside the game itself, and you can even promote them so you can help them grow so they can help you grow. And that's it as a quick whirlwind introduction to the difference between players and fans. I appreciate you guys coming. Any questions? There's enough. There are 8 people, 7 people, and we have time. Everybody can ask me like 5 minutes of questions. Go. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask, specifically, with the theme of this conference and a minority group such as LGBT or anything like this, if they're hoping to develop content that either they are, in particular, a minority developer making content or are developing content for a minority group, how does this kind of dynamic really play into, I guess, their strategy, and what are some maybe additional challenges or opportunities that they might have? Does that make sense?
I think I understand the question.
Okay.
And if I don't answer the question, if I don't seem to be answering the question you asked, we can go back and forth and adjust. But I think that one of the great things about these new mediums, especially Twitch, is just the fact that you have an incredibly targeted. You can really focus like a laser on a specific target audience, and it's nice because it democratizes the broadcast ability. And obviously, YouTube introduced this concept, right? But with Twitch now, we find there's just so much more engagement with the audience since it's live that I think you have a much easier time building up a following and communicating with the people that you're really trying to reach. So I think any group, whether it's a minority or not, has a way to connect with their audience in a deeper way, a more meaningful way, using these new broadcast technologies.
Thanks. So in terms of driving engagement, maybe not to just a game product, maybe to the studio itself.
Mm-hmm.
Riot was obviously very good in doing that, where they fostered that growth, fostered that community, regardless of who it was. How do you recommend doing that kind of engagement for a brand or a company versus just a singular product?
For one, as opposed to one game or something like that. Well, one of the things I mentioned in my first talk was just the fact that you can build your personal brand even on a shoestring if you are just consistent about releasing multiple products. Because every product that you release, so that as you build your catalog, you basically are giving yourself permission to reach out to your established user base, and every new product that you release emphasizes the fact that you have a catalog to offer, right? And so people start to follow you just because of their interest in whatever you happen to be working on, as opposed to trying to build up, basically rather than having to pay that new user acquisition cost every time, you're leveraging your existing users to reduce that cost.
So in terms of something like Double Helix,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because they're an Amazon studio now. Okay. I project, so it's weird to hold a microphone in my hand. So in terms of getting that kind of exposure, I mean, do you want exposure for Killer Instinct? Do you want exposure for Double Helix? Is it both? How are you measuring that kind of success? I know you're developer evangelist more so than on that sort of team,
Mm-hmm.
but what is the goal there? What kind of back and forth do you have within that balance of growing a brand versus growing a product versus how it reflects on the organization as a whole?
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I understand the question. I don't know I'm the best that I'm the best
Okay.
person to answer it, but it's an interesting question for sure. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, so this is sort of like a super practical application kind of question.
Okay.
So you're an independent developer. You're doing things mostly solo, maybe a very small team, a couple of contractors, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That means that you have like no spare time. And this kind of thing is like, that's a full-time job for some people.
It feels like it,
right?
doesn't it? Yeah.
So the question becomes, when you're in that kind of situation where it's like, I have to spend all my time making the game. It's not made yet,
Mm-hmm.
so I can't just spend all my time marketing it. But you're in that situation where you're in development, you're doing the content creation, but you don't want to leave it to the last second. You want to start actually like building early. Where do you spend your time, do you think?
Well, I know exactly what you're talking about. And the first thing I can recommend are things like practical things you can do in parallel. Like you can submit your alphas to competitions because that immediately raises your profile. It gets a lot of influencers interested in your work and following you. And there's not a lot of effort involved in, emailing somebody a current build. Following up is another question, but it's something that you can do in your spare time, what little spare time you have. But on the other hand, I think a deeper approach to this question is to look at the fact that most developers don't get into development because they're really interested in marketing, right? This is like a weakness that most of the developers that I know, including myself, have when it comes to programming. I'm interested in programming the game. That's the fun part. But the problem is that marketing is really fundamental to any successful game. I mean, I said earlier that there are lots of examples of games that are successful with a minimum of marketing or just organic marketing. But the game developers who are consistently successful do marketing. It's not something they can ignore. And so I guess if you find yourself completely strapped, you have no time left for doing the marketing, then that's a really good indicator that maybe you don't have time for marketing because you don't want to make time for marketing, right? It's like in the back of your mind, you're like, oh, that's not I'm going to program because that's the fun part. And it's hard sometimes to really focus on the part that you don't feel as strong in. And so I would highly recommend that if you don't feel like you're strong in marketing, get strong in marketing, because that's really what separates the successful developers from the less successful developers.
Right, and are there, like amongst the stuff that you've presented, are there like particular things that you'd say that like, this is good for a developer to do even if they're not really good at, like marketing in general? Because I mean, you talked about like streaming development, for instance. But that kind of carries with it the practical question of, well, when do I start doing that? Because if I'm doing it when I start the game, there's nothing there. Who's going to watch it? It's just a wall of code.
Right.
Yeah, so
It's
sort
really
of a
hard.
practical question like that.
It's really hard. I've tried to stream live development, and I have a lot of respect for, like Vlambeer, the example I threw up there. They're really good at it, and it's really difficult because for specifically that reason, you're sitting there and you're thinking, man, who's going to want to watch me beat my head against the wall or do Google searches for API calls for 2 hours or 6 hours or whatever it is. But you'd be surprised. I mean, what's cool about it is even when I felt like I was really failing, there would still be 2 or 3 people on stream that I could bounce ideas off of, or they'd be asking me a question, or they'd be saying, hey, you should try this. And what's interesting is it's not so much the content that you're building, it's the community that you're building. And I was shocked. I mean, I'm an old school developer, right? I mean, I started a long time ago, and when we had to release on floppy disks. And this is just fantastic. I was like so enthused and encouraged by the fact that there were people who were, maybe they have me on in the background, but they're still on and they're still interacting with me, even at a really early stage. And, like I said, Vlambeer and Steamroller Studios, there are a lot of examples of studios that have amazing success, 10, 12, 15,000 subscribers who are paying $3 a month to get on stream with them. And it's just really encouraging. I think that if you really have no time to do anything else, besides sending your alpha or beta to a bunch of people that you think might be able to help you down the road, just jump online and try programming on the stream and see how it goes. Because if nothing else, you'll meet a lot of other people and get ideas on other things you can try too. Okay, well, thanks very much. I really appreciate you guys coming. Thank you. Yeah, enjoy the rest of the show.